What's going on, guys? This is going to be our summary of markets week 63, and then we're going to get into our stock and option watch list after that. As you guys can see, my charts are a little different this week. I am testing out a new bot that we're making, so we're going to do a special edition of the summary of markets where I go over all the same things that we typically go over, but in this case, I'm going to be using the bot. So let's take a look at SPY to start off with. We can see that the daily is very bullish. 4 hour, 1 hour, 15-minute, all very bullish. They've basically been in longs for quite some time now without any price pullbacks or any let up on the bull side. So the bulls are very strong here. They look like they're going to keep pushing it. Let's go ahead and zoom in here to the daily. You can also see the Momos pinching bullishly here. A Momo pinch is when you have the long-term and short-term momentum both very close together and going in the same direction. I think I talked about this last week. You basically do not want to trade against that pinch until it stops, right? Now, I kind of broke my own rules there because I did take a put as a lotto for a gap fill here. So I am looking for a little bit of a gap fill down to that gap around 406 or 400. So I did take a 400 lotto put. I think it expires in a week and a half or 2 weeks, so we'll see if that pays off. Right now I'm down about 50% on that, I believe, so already not paying off, but we'll see. On Friday, had a little bit of a nasty close. You can see that doji topping out there. You typically do not want to see dojis after a gap up or during a very strong move to the upside. These dojis kind of indicate a reversal incoming, so that might be the first warning sign that the bulls are getting a little weak here. Now, we do want to wait until a Momo gives us a little bit of a pullback and kind of breaks that pinch before we start looking to the downside. But I would be a little worried here. I probably would not be entering any longs or any heavy bullish positions up here until that doji is broken. Now, if we go down to lower time frames, let's go down to a 15-minute. We can see that not only do we have one gap here, we also have a gap down here, and then we have another gap way down here. So SPY typically does not like to leave gaps as it's pushing into all-time highs. Typically, when it pushes into all-time high and it gaps while it's doing it, it will pull back and correct and fill those gaps. So zooming out, you can see that we have gaps leading all the way down to a 4% failure. That's not typically somewhere that you want to start taking big long positions or any options like call side options, right? So really, until at least one of these gaps is filled, I would not be going too heavy to the buy side. Now, obviously, you don't typically want to bet against trends like this that are extremely strong. You can see the pullbacks are quickly being bought up. So it might be a waiting game. You might not want to take puts like I'm doing as like a lotto position. You might just want to wait until those gaps are filled, then fill some bullish positions. Kind of like what you would do in a crypto bull run. When Bitcoin is running very hard, you typically don't want to bet against it. You want to just wait until it kind of pulls back, then it starts to bottom out, then you go back into taking longs. Same thing here with SPY. You really don't want to bet against it here, but if it does pull back and fill the gaps, it could give you some long entries. Very bullish for now. Where I would start leaning locally bearish is probably below 415. And then if we break above like 418 to 420, it's probably going to continue higher. All right, let's move on to gold. So as we can see, the macros, the daily, the 4 hour, the 1 hour, we're starting to shift bullish on gold finally. You can see the buy signals are starting to come in again, and gold is finally starting to find a bottom. Now, we talked about this on the daily during the last few summary of markets. It was putting in that bulldog pattern. This is like literally textbook. If you guys ever wanted to see what a bulldog pattern looked like, this is perfect. You have the reversals on both the bottoms, so you have that double bottom perfectly curved back. You popped up off the double bottom, and then you created a little bit of a consolidation, kind of like a micro bull flag. This is exactly what you want to see for a bulldog bottoming pattern. Now, we broke out of the top of that bulldog. We broke out of the bull flag as well. So this is very bullish for the short term, okay? So as long as you stay above, I'd say like 1750 to 1760, this is definitely very bullish. Now, we do have a couple of levels back here being created by the bot, these little support levels. Those are going to be resistance moving forward until we break them. You can see we're topping out a little bit on that level right there. Once we break through these two levels, I would be looking for probably around these local highs, around 1850 to 1875. And then if we zoom out, we've been talking about this downtrend for quite some time now. And you could even create almost a new downtrend. Let me grab a trend line here. You could almost create like a new downtrend if we take these two levels. So basically, until you break out of that downtrend, it's not bullish, right? So we still have a long way to go to get toward that top of that downtrend, which is bullish locally, but long term, we really want to see that trend break. Obviously, on like the weekly, it's kind of creating that bearish channel. Once we break out of that, we can start talking about like 2000 to 2050. For now, not so much. It is starting to turn green on the bot, but no buy signal just yet. The daily did have a buy signal not too long ago, and it's starting to play out a little bit. You can see on the 4 hour as well, a couple of buy signals coming in. So the macro time frames, the 1 to 4 hour, they're starting to lean a little bit to the bullish side. Let's move on to oil. So as we can see on oil, the daily just gave you a buy a couple days ago. 4 hour gave you a buy a while back. The 1 hour is actually in a sell, and the 50 minutes in a sell. So a little short-term pullback, but the long term is still very bullish. Let's zoom in here to the daily. This buy signal is pretty good. We talked about this during the last summary of markets where I told you guys it was putting in an accumulation. So now we have the confirmation break of that accumulation. So we didn't really know which way this accumulation was going to go next week. And then we finally saw it 2 days ago. We saw that breakout with that buy signal. So I would definitely lean bullish here until you reclaim like $60. As long as $60 holds as support, I would lean bullish for the short term. So looking at the 4 hour here, you can also see that we have that breakout from that accumulation. So a little bit of a topping pattern, kind of a distribution coming in, but I would definitely lean bullish for the short term and long term as long as that daily stays in a buy signal. The next target I would say would probably be around 66 and then maybe around 70 as well. Let's move on to Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is actually generating a sell signal on the daily. It has not confirmed it yet. It would have to close in about 3 hours to confirm that signal. 4 hour gave you a sell signal before that sell-off, which ended up being very strong to the downside. We are still bearish on the 4 hour. 1 hour, same thing, gave you a couple of sell signals, one there, and one right here. You can't see it, it's behind the take profit. But sell signals all the way down pretty much. But look at what we have here. Buy signal coming in on the 1 hour, and then we also have a buy signal on the 15 minutes. So what does that tell me? That tells me short term is trying to bounce, but the long term macros are still bearish. Okay, so we want to see the 4 hour flip into a buy signal and then the daily to turn off that sell signal. If the daily does confirm the sell signal, we want to see that quickly flip back into a buy signal. Okay, so let's zoom in here to the daily. We can see that we had a little bit of a bear div here before that sell-off. The bear divs haven't been too strong for quite some time, obviously, because the trend has been so bullish. But this bear div actually did end up playing out, and we had a little bit of a pullback down into that support. If we look at that support that got generated by the bot, it was damn near the bottom to the tick. So support around 51,000 all the way down to like 49,000. And as long as that holds, it should be bullish moving forward. Okay. Like I said, we want to wait for that 4 hour buy signal to come in and then wait for that daily to flip into a buy signal. Short term, already trying to bottom a little bit. Moving on to Ethereum. Basically the same thing here for Ethereum, but the Ethereum daily has not given you that sell signal. So 4 hour was a sell signal, 1 hour was a sell, and then 15 obviously gave you a few sells there as well. Now, what we're seeing is 15-minute buy signal, 1 hour buy signal, 4 hours still no buy. The daily is still actually in a buy though. So what we want to wait for here is we want to wait for that 4 hour to turn back into a buy signal. Okay. Once that happens, that will confirm that this pullback is shifting back into that bullish trend. Okay. Let's zoom in here to the daily. Now, if we look at the price action, we can see that there was a lot of distribution here before we broke out, right? So when it pulls back, you got to understand there's a lot of value here. So it's pulling back to retest value, and the closer it pulls back, or I would say the stronger it pulls back before going deeper into that value, the stronger it is. Okay, so if it pulls back closer to the top, that means that that value is very bullish. If it pulls back closer to the bottom, then this value is leaning more to the bearish side because you're losing a lot of that value, right? We're not losing that value right now. That value is still staying bullish with that bottom wick. So that tells us that the bulls are very strong here. And as long as the bulls hold this value as support, I would lean bullish, okay? So right now, as I said, that daily is still a buy signal. I think the 12-hour is a sell, so watch for the 12-hour to flip back into a buy, and that will be definitely bullish moving forward. Short term, we're already bouncing, so this looks like it is very strong. If the daily closes like this, we might go for a secondary retest of the wick, which we typically see a lot in crypto. When crypto puts in long wicks, kind of like right here, you can see how it put in a long wick and then it came down to retest it. You see that a lot in crypto. So if this closes like this, we could see a little bit of a pullback towards the bottom of that wick. But then as long as it holds that wick as support, we should continue higher. Okay, just understand that just because we close like this doesn't mean that's the bottom. You do see secondary retests a lot on crypto. But all right, that is the summary markets. Let's move on to the watch list. And we are also going to stay with the bot here. I'm going to ignore a lot of these ones that we were watching previously because they are not on my watch list currently. Actually, Katos I'm still watching. Let's move that down here. These ones on the bottom are the ones that I'm paying attention to moving forward. So Katos, we're seeing a daily buy off that the bulldog that we were looking at, but it's getting a little bit bearish on the shorter time frames. You can see the 4 hours giving a sell, 1 hour is giving a sell. The 15-minute gave a buy, but it's already starting to pull back a little bit. So this is starting to look a little bearish. If we don't see this bounce, basically on Monday or Tuesday, this buy signal is probably going to flip into a sell because we're not pushing away from that signal, right? We had a take profit right here and a resistance come in around 29. I have an alert set for when we break out of 29, but it's not doing it so far. So you can see we're also losing momentum. So until that momentum starts to climb and we start to break that resistance around 29, this is probably going to lean bearish. But watch for that breakout trade next week. This could still be a very strong trade. Moving on to NEO. NEO is still in a sell signal on most of the time frames, especially the higher time frames. So the daily is still in a sell. The 4 hour just entered a sell not too long ago. The 1 hour wasn't a sell, wasn't a buy, but then it got stopped out. So no signal currently on that. The 15-minute isn't a sell, but it's very choppy, so not a whole lot of price action there to base our trade off of. What I do want to take a look at, though, is this little descending triangle. So we have kind of a descending triangle forming here on NEO, but it looks like it's bouncing out of it with that Friday close. But look at the Momo. The Momo is pinching bearishly, so this looks like it does want to sell off into earnings. But if we do bounce off these supports and we kind of flip that pinch into a bullish pinch, then we should be able to break out of this descending triangle bullishly. Obviously, I would wait for a daily buy signal or at least a 4 hour buy signal. I would definitely wait for that triangle to break as well. But we definitely want to flip this pinch bullishly. So we want to cross that zero line with that momentum. Now, I don't trade earnings. You guys know that. So I would probably wait until after earnings to kind of take a bigger position. But I would definitely watch this pattern here because if it loses this pattern here, most likely going back down to around 27 to 28, which would be a pretty nasty sell-off, okay? So if you guys are holding NEO shares, I would definitely watch out for that. Moving on to Snapchat. Snapchat, we do have a daily buy. We had a 4-hour buy, just flipped into a sell. 1 hour, very choppy, so I would ignore those signals. And then the 15-minute flipping into a buy. So short term, trying to bottom a little bit, but the macros are a little toppy. 4-hour selling and the daily taking profit. So I would not be too bullish on Snapchat just yet. But if we look at the price action here, zoom into the daily, we can see that we do, let me change the color so it's easier to see this. We can see that we do have a topping pattern here on kind of almost like an inverse head and shoulders. We have the left shoulder, the head, and now we're putting in the right shoulder, right? So if I delete all this, let's predict that we pull back maybe to around 58. And as long as you hold that, that will put in the right shoulder, and then we should push higher into around 70 to around 75, okay? So I wouldn't be too bullish just yet on Snapchat, but if they do have good earnings and we start to break above like 65, this should push higher into around 70 to 75, okay? Moving on to CVS, I still really like CVS here. We can see the 4-hour is in a buy, daily's in a buy, 1 hour is, and 15. So all time frames that are major time frames are in buy signals here. Let's zoom into the daily. The momentum is starting to climb bullishly. Now look at where we are. This is that resistance that we've been on for quite some time. If we look at the tops here, they're all kind of topping out around the same level. If we zoom out, go to a weekly, we can see why we're topping out here. A lot of resistance around that 2020 high and that 2019 high. So until this is kind of broken, there's just a lot of sell pressure here. But this is more of a longer term trade. But if we do break above, I'd say 76 to around 78, this should begin a massive breakout of this long-term accumulation. It's been accumulating for almost 4 years, okay? So keep an eye on this. If we do break out of around 78 to 80, this should start to head into around 100 to 95. That should be the long-term target. Now, obviously, this is on like a weekly time frame, so that would take a very long time. But if you guys like to trade more longer-term setups, then definitely keep an eye on CVS. Another one that I'm keeping an eye on is McDonald's. Daily is in a buy signal. We have the 4-hour in a buy, 1 hour in a buy, 15-minute in a buy. So all major time frames in a buy. Let's zoom into the daily. We do have a little bit of a take profit here, but we are breaking out of the resistance with a strong gap up. We do have earnings coming up, so I think I'm anticipating, I think the traders are anticipating a run up into earnings. If they do have good earnings, we should see a continuation here. Now, we did just break out of a massive resistance, which was an all-time high. If we go down to like a weekly, we can see we have the 2019-2020 high. We have the 2020 high there as well. So like just before the Corona nuke and then after the Corona nuke, we have a lot of resistance here, but we're just now breaking out of it. Okay, so as long as the earnings aren't bad, this should begin a massive bullish impulse to around 250, maybe even like 275 long term. So if we look at the daily going more into a kind of a shorter time frame, I would still be bullish as long as that gap fill holds. Okay, so as long as it pulls back and fills that gap, but it doesn't go much lower. So I would say as long as it holds like 230, this should continue higher. Now be a little careful here. You do have a little bit of a bear div coming in. All right, moving on to American Eagle. Basically the same thing as McDonald's, bullish on every time frame. Let's zoom into the daily. Basically the same thing, gapping up into a breakout of all-time high. We do have a Momo pinch bullish, so the momentum is very bullish. Same thing here, like I said on McDonald's, as long as when we come down, we don't go much lower than that gap. So let's say around like 32. As long as you stay above 32, this should continue higher. I would look for around 37 to around 40 for that. Another one that I really like that's starting to break out of this accumulation is Snow. We have a daily buy signal, 4-hour buy, 1-hour buy, 15-minute buy. So a lot of time frames are bullish here. They are getting a little choppy, but that is pretty standard with an inverse head and shoulders, right? So we have kind of like an inverse head and shoulders, very ugly. You could just call this a channel, right, or a bear flag. But what we're looking for, no matter what you call it, is a break of like 242 to 244. Okay, so we want to break above these highs and then start to push back into the value around 270. I think there's a daily pivot around like 262, which would be a local target as well. So keep an eye on this. If we start to hold above like 245, somewhere around there, look for around 260 to 270. Moving on to Dash. Dash had a beautiful buy signal coming here on the daily as well as the 4-hour. We're breaking out of a long-term accumulation after this bearish impulse, and most time frames are turning bullish. Let's zoom into the daily. We have a Momo pinch bullish coming in. Daily buy signal, like I said, a little bit of resistance coming in around 151. But our overall target on this would be around 160 to 165. There's a daily pivot around there that we're looking for. As long as the pullback doesn't go much deeper than I'd say like 144 to 145-ish, I think this is still pretty bullish. All right, moving on. Coin, we can't really talk about too much on the higher time frames, but if we go down to a lower time frame, let's go to like a 15-minute. It's putting in an accumulation as well, but the problem is this is Coinbase, right? They're crypto related. There was a nasty, nasty sell-off on Bitcoin just yesterday. So that has not been priced in to the equities. So a lot of these crypto stocks or crypto companies, they are going to get hurt most likely tomorrow. Okay. So keep an eye on Coinbase. I would not be too optimistic. Most likely will drop probably below like 330, 320. If it starts to break below like 300, that's where I'd start to be a little scared. People were posting a lot of stuff on Twitter about how the insiders were selling a lot of their shares. Now there was a lot of misinformation going on about that. I didn't look too far into it, but it looked like they were selling their shares that they were allowed to sell, like the ones that were off the lockup. One of the posts said like their CFO closed 100% of his shares, and so did their CPO. That I didn't think was true. I read the comments. People are saying they sold 100% of their shares that were out of their lockup, so they didn't like liquidate their entire position. But with that said, they are still selling, so a little scary. All right, let's move on to big tech. So pretty much all the big tech charts look the same. They're all very bullish on every time frame. Let's zoom into the daily here. Actually, for this one, let me go to my other layout. Let's go back to our old layout. I believe it was this one. Let's see. Yeah, this one here. Because I have all these levels mapped out already for tech. So for Microsoft, I believe I posted in Discord, it was like 262 to around 264. So you want to keep an eye on these levels above us here. But right now, it's definitely very bullish. As long as you stay above 257, you should be pushing higher. On Apple, we hit all of our targets below us. 133 is a strong level. If you hold above 133, I would keep an eye on around 137 to 139. Facebook, you also hit all of our targets below you, but we still have not hit those 319 to 320 targets, okay? We had a gap above us. We instantly filled that, and we're selling off just a little bit here. So if we lose like 304, I would look for around 300. If you gain 310, watch that 319 to 320. Netflix is getting a little choppy here, but we want to hold above VWAP, above 548 to get that 564 target, okay? If it can't hold above VWAP, most likely going back down to 530. Moving on to Amazon, we hit all of our targets below us, 3208, 3269, 3341. Next target is 3446, and as of right now, that's my final target. It has to stay above 3341, okay? Tesla, beautiful, beautiful trade. If you guys listen to Summary Markets, I told you guys exactly how to trade that. We took a very nice trade on Tesla last week, made over 100% profit. I told you guys as long as it broke 711, very likely going into 769, right? Now we have to hold above 769, and we could get to 825. But we have earnings coming up. Tesla holds a lot of Bitcoin. Bitcoin sold off yesterday. We could see a little bit of a sell pressure come in tomorrow. There was also bad news. There was a fatal crash with a Tesla that they're blaming on the autopilot. So if that news is true, Tesla most likely will sell off. Keep an eye on that 666 pivot, and then there's VWAP around 648. Okay, as long as you hold above VWAP, I think long-term you're still bullish. But all right, guys, that is the summary of markets. Hopefully you guys like this video. Make sure to hit the like button on the video if you guys aren't already. Subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys tomorrow for our stream at 3 p.m. Eastern. See you guys later.